Good evening, boys and girls. This is Al here. I am joined by a special guest today, Restoring the Faith Media. Um, how are you, Mike?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on. And
Yeah, no, it's
congratulations on the growth of your channel.
oh well, thank you so much. I actually got into your stuff over the pandemic. We're at home, not a lot to do, and finding Catholic YouTubers. I found your stuff, and yeah. So tell us how you came to know the Lord Jesus Christ and ended up in the Catholic Church.
Well, actually, the very first Catholic mass that I went to was in 2002. I was invited to mass by a friend who could tell that I wasn't taking my Protestant faith very seriously at the time. And it was an SSPX mass. It was a traditional Latin mass in 2002 in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so my very first exposure to Catholicism was the Latin Mass. And I think that that planted a seed because not even 3 years later, I was Catholic.
Okay. Oh,
But
sorry.
I will tell you that I was very skeptical of Catholics because there's so much. It was so much. It was a low mass too, And so when you go from a really highly sensory experience in Protestantism, something that is always very emotive, and there's a lot of music and there's fabulous preaching and all this, and then you go to a low mass and you see postures that you don't see in Protestantism, kneeling and that sort of thing. You hear a sacred language that you don't know what's going on, and I believe it was the mass that I attended. There was more dialogue to it than maybe most, because I remember vividly that a lot of the people were making responses in Latin, and I just was like, how do these people know what's going on? And then there's long bouts of silence, and so like those three things really I think planted a seed. I always was wanted to find the truth. And so I think anyone who's open to the truth will eventually be Catholic. And that certainly was true in my life. But I think I have never really talked about this on YouTube, but the old evangelization works. It's like the way we converted the world and Christendom really works. It's the old mass.
Yeah, it's tried, tested, and true. It's got all the best parts of it, and I see it's got the fullness of the truth, which makes it so attractive. Um, just curious, what kind of Protestant were you prior to conversion?
Immediately prior to conversion, I was baptized Presbyterian, but at various stages in my younger life, in my young adult life, I was different flavors of there was mainline, and then there was like evangelical type, non-denominational, and I think like many Protestants, I spent some time in all of the above.
Okay, so all right. Now, well, that kind of answered my second question. It's how'd you get involved with the Latin Mass, but that's sounds like you were involved with it right off the bat. And so, yeah, if you convert in the early 2000s, what prompted you to start RTF Media?
Well, what I discovered is that a more like a deeper conversion into the traditional Catholic faith, the morality of Saint Alphonsus de Liguori, the strong Thomistic scholastic tradition of the Catholic faith, Thomism, realism, correct philosophy, correct um, theology, that you could go to you could in theory go to a low mass, not talk to anybody, leave, follow the mass, pray the mass even devoutly, um, but it wouldn't necessarily permeate all of your life. You know, it wouldn't necessitate a change in your lifestyle. It wouldn't mean that you comport yourself a certain way, or you dress a certain way, or you appoint your house in a certain way, or you raise your children in a certain way. You know what I mean? It's the mass is the highest form of our prayer. That's true, and it is the crown jewel, but it is a jewel amongst an entire crown. And what I came to understand when after going for a while and meeting a bunch of people and sort of observing things, what I realized is that there were some people that understood this fact and some people that didn't. And the ones who understood it just lived better lives. They just led lives that were animated by Catholicism in everything that they did. There was no square foot of their life that you could point to where you could say, "Hey, that's not Catholic," or "That's not," there's these people had integral Catholic lives. And I wanted to be more like those people, and I wanted to learn from them, and I placed myself at their feet. And then one of them, who had become a very serious and very close mentor, passed away. And after that, I realized that if it's not for but for the personal connection of someone holding your hand and taking you through the process and helping you grow in tradition, if he hadn't done that for me, I don't know where I would be right now. I'd still be going to Latin mass, but um, certain things about my life probably would be different right now, and not different for the better. And so I thought, RTF should exist in order to provide some semblance of that to other people, to give people an opportunity to come to the fullness of the traditional Catholic way of life. And so RTF really has always focused on the family life, because every priest, every pope, every bishop comes from a family. So it all starts there. It's very grounded in Dom Garam J, the liturgical year. So it's about living liturgically. It's about history. It's about just life experiences. And when COVID came along, what I was able to kind of do with the channel was take all of those traditional Catholic principles of living in accordance with reality, and the principles of logic, let's say, like just the basic principles, like the principle of non-contradiction, or you know the principle of the excluded middle, and apply those things to the big, kind of lies that we were seeing being told. And a lot of people really found that to be helpful. So that's kind of when the channel really grew, during COVID, because of COVID. Prior to COVID, there were 3 or 4 or 5 of us at one point who were kind of, bouncing around ideas on what we could, talk about. And we talked about the saints and the angels, and some of that stuff. And I love that stuff, and I want to get back to doing that stuff. Um, but our world changed underneath our feet so drastically and so dramatically that it just required a rational response to it. And that idea of addressing the irrationality of the world became the Rundown Show, that I started with Steve Cunningham at Sensus Fidelium, and we would dual stream it to his channel and my channel. I would put it on my Facebook, because at the time my Facebook was much bigger than the YouTube, and he would put it on Sensus Fidelium. And then we realized that we were saying stuff that was not appropriate for Census, and so we moved it over to my YouTube, and we kept the show going. And then we added more people. We added more people to the show, and then regular people. So Brother Martin and Ryan Grant joined, and then Steve bailed out, with the church militant thing, and James joined us right around that time as well. And we've kept the rundown going, but RTF, to the heart of it is sermons from St. Alphonsus, sermons from St. Newman. Um, I never, unlike I think so, unfortunately some commentators want to point to themselves as an authority. I'm not an authority, but I know who is, and they're the people behind me on the shelf, and so I always wanted, um, yeah, I always wanted RTF to just be about pointing to the doctors and the scholars and the saints of the church. That's it, and with a little bit of spunk and personality.
Yeah, no, that's true, and like something I've noticed when I've read the doctors and the fathers of the church is that it's the same thing over and over again. It's just the same method, like applying it to a new scenario. Like if you're in North Africa in the year 400, you're in Saint Augustine Church or his city, and that's where you learn is different than someone who, like in the 16 or 1700s, would listen to Saint Alphonsus. Like it's a different scenario, but it's giving you uh the same thing to work with, and that's what the doctors, at least I find the doctors are so good at doing. It's teaching the faith. I'm currently doing a lot of research on the great reformist popes, Pope Gregory VII, Pius V, and basically all they were doing was adapting the church to serve the people of God in a new environment. Like obviously the world of Pope Gregory VII in the 11th century, like that stuff, it's good. It was perfect, but you get a few centuries later, things change. You need Pius V to update it, and I think we're currently awaiting our next reformist pope.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think that the doctors never invented anything new. There was no novelty to anything that they were saying. There's a continuity, there's a organic continuity to the past. And anything that is novelty, or which is rupture, is just illegitimate, and it dies. It may take 100 years to die or 200 years to die, but it's anything without roots to the apostolic tradition is just not long for this world.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the Protestant churches, how like there's thousands of Protestant churches. It's not like they're like, all right, our church is going to follow the Bible. No, there were tons of other churches saying, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong," and the answer was the church they left in the first place. And to this day, more churches are getting created because, like you said, they're not grounded truly in the apostolic, a positive faith that comes from our Lord.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay. Have you happened to see the documentary, well, I'm sure you have, the Mass of the Ages?
Episode one, I saw episode one. Yes. I think at one point I was gonna try to preview episode two, but because of the current situation, some people don't want me promoting their products right now. I have a thorn chasing me around that I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. In the first Mass of the Ages, there's a priest in the first episode by the name of Father Jackson, who is a fraternity of St. Peter priest. And a few months ago, he was arrested and charged with possession of child porn. Of course, he's pleaded not guilty to these charges. I do understand that the charges have been dropped on a state level, but it's still going ahead federally. So tell us a bit about this situation here.
Well, you say, of course, that he's pled not guilty, and the fact is that that is a important fact that should not be, I don't think, discounted. So you look at it and you say certain people online predicted that he would plead guilty. Certain people online convicted him before he even had a pleading. There was some shuffling as well with his appearances and with the jurisdictions, and so there was one appearance in which there was no pleading, and even that was interpreted to mean that he's guilty. So
Wow.
people took very strong opinions early on, when the only thing that was available to the public on this case was like a 2-page, affidavit from the arresting officer, and that's the only thing that the government produced and released to the public. And there wasn't a lot of information in that document, but it was just assumed that this man, Father James Jackson, was going to, just plead guilty because he was guilty. And a lot of people said that, and certain loud voices said that very loudly. They have very cleverly walked back those comments over time when Father Jackson did assert his innocence by pleading not guilty. And so I don't want to minimize that fact, because that was a huge hurdle in my personal life as well, because I was accused of supporting him before he even pled not guilty. And what are you going to do when he pleads guilty? Aren't you going to look like an idiot? Aren't you going to look like a fool? So that milestone right there it's not just a minor footnote. He's fighting for his life right now. He has a very good attorney, and his attorney is doing everything he can to defend him and exonerate him, and that's where he is.
Yeah, and like ultimately, I want the truth to prevail. But I mean, sometimes that's well, I do hope for the best. If I'm curious, do you see any? Because I saw this right off the bat. Do you see any resemblances between what's happening with Father Jackson and what happened with Cardinal Pell?
I'm not super familiar with the Cardinal Pell case. I do know that there was that funny money transfer from the Vatican. I do know that, there was some jury tampering, and that ultimately he was cleared of any wrongdoing, although his name continues to be marred. Um, I I don't think that we can rule anything out in 2022. And that is ultimately why I felt compelled to do something, because you look at just a raw timeline. All these things are publicly verifiable things. You know, um, Fake Catholic usurper in chief Joe Biden meets with Pope Francis. Pope Francis has already begun his assault on traditional Carmelites in the United States and around the world. Actually, really, anyone in a cloister, any contemplative cloisters are under attack with core Irans. Um, Pope Francis had, or others in the Vatican, other actors in the Vatican had already signaled that visitators were already being pre-scheduled to come to the various orders, the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ the King. The visitator is an official representative of the Holy See. He's an inspector. He's a cleric who's there to see what's on the up and up. Traditionis Custodes had come out, that prior summer. The clarification letter, which even gave it more teeth and made it more dire, had come out. So it's clear that the pressure and the walls on the pressure is building on traditionalists, and it's not only from just the secular world, which always has hated traditionalists and always will, but it's from the barbarians inside the church. And some of those barbarians are clerics, and some of them are lay people, and some of those barbarians are agents of the revolution, and even have publications. And so I looked at it and I said to myself, I remember this very, very vividly. It was either the evening of the 1st or the 2nd of November. It was before I launched the fundraiser. And my wife and I lined up our children, 5 of whom can kneel, and 1 is a baby. And we knelt in front of the image of the Holy Face that we keep in our living room with a lighted candle. And we looked into the Holy Face, and we said a chaplet of the Holy Face. And what we knew about Father Jackson was that he's a man of the Holy Face, a big promoter of it. During the COVID lockdowns, he talked about the Holy Face. And I only know this not because he would put anything online, or maybe he did, and I just missed it. But I would read his parish bulletins. All of us were so desperately searching for truth during the misinformation, during the unspecified virus of unspecified origin. And so we would look at, I would read his parish bulletin because I found it to be very good. And he did a whole series on the splendor of the human face and how it reflects the face of Christ. And I even put some of those out as a podcast. I labeled them as as a anonymous FSSP priest, because I didn't even want any attribution to the man, because I've never met him, and I still have never met him. I've had no contact with him whatsoever. But I knew that about him, and I also knew his reputation. Being that this is my 20th year attending the traditional Latin Mass now, everyone knows Father Jackson. Everyone knows he wrote the book Nothing Superfluous. Everybody knows that he's one of the prominent figures in the traditional movement in the United States. He's one of the gray hairs, in the Fraternity of St. Peter. He's one of the most esteemed. I think he was elected to the deanery in Denver. He has a sterling record. Thousands and thousands of parishioners, former parishioners from everywhere he's ever been, from Oklahoma to Colorado to anywhere he's ever touched, who have been touched by this man spiritually in incredible ways. I thought his book was really good. It's obviously written, like a melancholic would write, but I don't mind that. And so I looked at it, and I looked at my wife, and I said, something doesn't add up here. Just something about this, the fact that he is so vocal about the illegal lockdowns, and he was so vocal about flouting the rules, in the face of his archbishop, and didn't seem to suffer from that too much, but also didn't seem to care if his local authorities were going to come down on him. What his goal was to bring the sacraments to his people. And I thought, I don't think that a man who does believe in the transmission of supernatural grace through the sacraments, I don't think that a man who's willing to skylight himself to his local, state, municipalities, authorities, to his chancery, to the Fraternity of St. Peter, I don't think that he's going to have a weird, dark sin like this. I don't think a man of the Holy Face, in other words, would do something like this. And that was the conclusion that my wife and I came to from afar. Just admiring the guy from afar, knowing some of his effects, knowing some of his parishioners. You travel. I used to be in a career in which I traveled quite a bit, ran around the country. I know a bunch of people in Denver. I know a bunch of people in, various parts of the country. All in the trad community, some for various amounts of time. A lot of really good families, a lot of big families, a lot of very successful businessmen. And so you hear things about people. And I never, ever heard a bad thing about Jim Jackson. And I just thought, this is so silly. All of this is, we got to do something for him, because what I was hearing at the time, and everybody has imperfect information, you look back, in the rearview mirror, and you have a more perfect view of what was going on. But what I was hearing at the time was that he was in jail and he couldn't make his bail. And the fraternity's SOP, which we all know, is to sort of like, do this and say, well, fend for yourself. Good luck. And so it seemed like, the man was just gonna sit in jail. And I'm like, he can't even make his bail. What is going on with this, And so I told my wife, Mrs. RTF, I said, we're gonna do this. Maybe this is the reason RTF has grown. Maybe it's why it exists. Maybe this is the one reason why I've done this. I don't know. Maybe, you know what I mean? And so we went out to YouTube, started a fundraiser for him. And the fundraiser was very, very clear. I said, look, I don't know him. I don't know if he did it or not. I don't think he did it. Maybe he did. And if he did, and I proposed almost like a Pascal's wager, okay, like 4 possibilities.
The cost benefit analysis. Yeah.
Right. Either he's going to be found innocent or guilty. Okay? Or some version of that, right? Where he like pleads guilty, whatever. But there's some pronouncement of innocence or some pronouncement of guilt. And then on the other hand, either people are going to believe that or not believe that. And so you have 4 possible scenarios where, if he's found guilty, but nobody believes it because they all think that, evidence was planted or he was set up or they got the wrong guy or whatever people believe, then we're going to have a very serious problem on our hands, right? Because then you have a situation where you've got conspiracy theories and you've got, people in it. It's a Cardinal Pell situation, where a man is condemned by the state, but everybody believes that the state was wrong. But you have the inverse of that as well. You could, in theory, he could be, let's say it's a different scenario where it's a pretty bad priest and everyone kind of knows it. And somehow he gets off from conviction from the state, but then everybody knows that he did it, And so we were probably not going to have that outcome, but we were going to have some version of either he's innocent or guilty, and people are not going to believe it either way. And that was my sense. People were not going to believe that he was capable of doing this, no matter what. It doesn't matter if the state convicts him or not. The vast majority of Catholics in the traditional movement in the United States, and maybe even North America, maybe Canada, where you are not going to believe that he did it, no matter what the court says. So I said, look, I'm not an expert, but I have some life experience. I've been an officer in the Marine Corps. I've done investigations before. I hold a top secret security clearance and still do. I have certain certifications in cyber protection, and so as I look at it as a layman, from an outsider point of view, just with what is publicly available, I don't know anything. I have no insider information, and I have no access to the family or anything like that. But as I look at it, it doesn't add up to me. I don't think that they have any evidence linking it to him. And so I said, look, let's all prepare ourselves for the possibility that he is guilty. But either way, what we need to do in order to maintain credibility as a movement, the traditional movement, what we need to do is have some certainty, have a second set of eyes examining whatever we can examine. And, I wanted to hire a couple forensic examiners, maybe even a team, depending on how much we would raise. Certainly pay his lawyer. Pay his lawyer up front, because in this country, you have the right to remain silent, and your silence cannot be interpreted to impugn your guilt, right? And even people who graduated law school should know this, and yet they don't seem to know that. I mean, let me just give you a quick example, and I know this is a long answer, Al, but thanks for hanging in with me. But if you go back to the Rittenhouse case, I mean, they were this close to mistrial when the prosecution started even hinting at Rittenhouse's silence, and even very obliquely implying that Rittenhouse's silence could imply guilt. The judge ripped a hole in that prosecutor so wide you could almost see him bleeding out with a sucking chest wound, right there in the courtroom. In these United States, the right to remain silent is absolutely sacrosanct. And I've since had litigators tell me stories about mistrials because prosecutors start interpreting silence to mean guilt. That is how seriously we take the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States in these United States. And yet, in spite of that, you have attorneys online who are saying, well, because he hasn't proclaimed his innocence, he's guilty. I mean, so like that's point number one. And because I believe in this country, you have the right to remain silent. Number two, you have the right to a vigorous defense. In a case like this, in a criminal case where your life is on the line, the rest of your life, your freedom, the government better get it right, and they better prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, beyond any doubt, right? And so that's why you pay for the attorney. And number three, in this country, we believe in the presumption of innocence. And we just do. You're innocent until you're proven guilty. And no advocacy media, no Twitter mob can convict anyone in this country. And we have, whenever it's a GOP kind of like boomer politics thing, you see these people come out and they're like, oh no, it's presumption of innocence. Rittenhouse is innocent until proven guilty. Well, why isn't Father Jackson innocent until proven guilty? Well, because it's different in this case. In these types of cases, the government never gets it wrong, right? That's what we're being told. Well, I just disagree with that. In an age in which we have all been lied to about what the definition of a human being is.
Oh, yeah.
Where we've been lied to about what the definition of the scientific method is. Where we've been lied to about what the purpose of government is, right? Why would we presume that the government is going to get anything right? Why would we presume that the government is, well, they have a 99% success rate in these types of cases? Well, then that means that there's the 1%. And our Lord went after the one lost sheep, didn't he? So I said, I'm going to do this fundraiser because I believe that he has a right to remain silent, that he has a right to an attorney, and that he has a right to be presumed innocent. And I presume right now, as we sit here today on whatever day today is, Monday, the 2nd of May, that Jim Jackson is innocent. I presume that he is innocent until it is demonstrated beyond the shadow of a doubt that he is guilty. So that's why I did the fundraiser. I said, look, half of it's going to go to, or at least half is going to go to his attorney, to pay for his attorney. And then I'm going to spend up to half on trying to put a second set of eyes on everything. And I wanted to cast a much wider net than 3 file transfers in the month of September of 2020. I want to cast a much wider net because the purpose of the private investigation was for the public. It's either to vindicate Jim Jackson's name to the public, to say, look, here's a man, here's what 15 years of data tells us in state A, right? Here's what 5 years of data tells us in state B. Here's what 90 days of data tells us in state C, right? Here's what we could find from this agency. Here's what we can find in this creative way. And, you never give away, sources or, means of collection or how you're collecting information. But there are a variety of ways to collect information. And I happen to be in that world, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. I was a communications officer, which means that every single digital impulse in between any unit, I had a say in that. And they don't give the level of clearance that I still hold technically as of today to people who haven't demonstrated an aptitude, to handle the information, to understand ways and means and how you collect things and where information comes from and compartmentalization, all that stuff. I have basic training in understanding of cryptography, basic training in signals. I ran a tier 1 data center in my early 20s that had 5 different levels of classified information in it, for 7,000 users across 5 time zones. I know a thing or two about the transfer of data packets from point A to point B. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to do the investigating myself. I know I'm not qualified, but I am qualified to manage an investigation. It's project management, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like the perfect guy for this because I'm one arm's length removed from Father Jackson. I've never met him. I'm not emotionally invested in the outcome. I do happen to think that he's innocent because I presume that, because that's how we operate in the United States of America. I understand, data security and cyber to some degree. I've done it in war and in peace. So I'm like, I'll hire someone and I'll be able to tell if that person's, BSing me or not. I'll instantly know, like, if the person has credentials, if they can assemble the right team, if we're looking at the right stuff. But again, not everything that I wanted to look at involved packets. The reason why the packets transferring from point A to point B is so important in this case is because I looked at the affidavit that was out there, right? That the arresting officer signed. And I looked at it and I said, there's no evidence here that links this thing to Jim Jackson. At best, they have an IP address, but an IP address is not a user. It's not a MAC address. It's not anybody's credentials. It's not an individual person. And as I started like peeling back the onion too, you just go to publicly available sources. And this is what I did on November 1st and November 2nd. I started looking at old parish bulletins and I realized that Father Jackson was out of town on at least one of the 3 occasions in which, the affidavit says that the rectory was surveilled. I started hearing that, that this rectory had a bunch of people who had access to it. I started hearing all these things that cast enough doubt in my mind to where I'm like, there's plausibility here that it's not him. And so the packets and my experience in information security and in cyber is what compelled me to act. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to spend all my time in cyber. It just means that I could read the affidavit and see that it was BS. And so that's what I did. I read it and I'm like, look, this document does not convict anybody. And it may not even, in my opinion, I don't even think it's basis for arresting anybody. It's basis for investigating, sure. Is there a transfer of files that are absolutely lewd and despicable? Yes. I believe that there probably was a transfer. But how that transfer was initiated and by whom was not addressed in that document. And therefore, there's no basis to arrest anybody based on that. You investigate, you don't arrest. So that's why I got involved. That's why I looked at it and said, I think there's something fishy here. And again, you have to look at it in the broader context of like inside baseball, church politics. Inside baseball, church politics is tradition is under attack. The walls are closing in. Traditionis Custodes is being implemented. Visitators are being dispatched from Rome. Cor Arans is suppressing Carmelite nuns. You almost think to yourself, man, if Frank had just one fall guy that he could point to who is a prominent trad figure, then he could use that as a pretext to suppress all of tradition, you know? And and you probably know this, Al. Of all the traditionalists in the world, the ones that Frank hates the most are we Americans. And the reason for that
Yep.
is because we're loudmouths. We're just we shout into our microphones and we have strong opinions, and half of the trads don't even think that Francis is the real pope. He, like, America is just a festering wound from his point of view, right?
Well,
And so
I'm
yeah.
just saying it's not just the trad community in America. I think he hates America, like he hated Trump, obviously, and sure, it's not and the fact, like, the trad Catholics in America are so vocal that that just adds gasoline on the fire.
Right, right. And so, you have to think. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to sit there and think, if Francis could just suppress and justify it, and justify suppressing American trads, he would do that tomorrow, because we are a pain in his ass. Forgive me for saying it that way, but so I'm thinking, like, well, this is his perfect opportunity. This is the absolute, served up on a silver platter. Here's a priest with a sterling record. No one has ever complained about him in 15 years, right? To my knowledge at the time. And now he's in a hostile environment. Look, you got to think about it from the priest's point of view too. Any priest, whenever a priest transfers from point A to point B, and he's a trad, and he's with the fraternity or the institute or or whatever, when he's in a brand new diocese or archdiocese, he doesn't, besides what the outgoing guy tells him, he doesn't personally know who his friends are and who his enemies are. Every chancery is filled with wolves, and it's a brood of vipers. And there are vicar generals out there that are downright wicked, and they have it out for the Fraternity of St. Peter, and they have it out for the Institute of Christ the King, and they have it out for all the diocesan men who are traditional and who wear their cassocks and who say the Latin Mass. All of these people have targets on their backs, and the high-ranking lispy vicar generals or vicar of clergy or vicar of this or that in these various dioceses are the broods of vipers that envelop even good bishops. You point to even the good bishops in the United States, and you can point to their number 2 or their number 3 or their number 4 that is an absolute vicious enemy. And so when you move into a brand new environment like that, you don't have time to establish relationships, to see who's good and bad, to see who's going to get your back. You don't necessarily know who to appeal to for help if you get into a situation. And so that's the other thing. It's a principle in warfighting called transition. Anytime you're in transition of any kind, that's when you're at your most vulnerable. When you are transitioning from a mounted position to a dismounted position, you're just getting out of your vehicle. That's when you're vulnerable, because you're looking down at where your feet are going on the ground, right? You're not looking around at what people are doing. You're trying to handle your weapon, but it's very awkward because you're wearing 100 pounds of armor, and it's 1,000 degrees outside, and the human factors are starting to get to you. So anytime you're in a period of transition, when a convoy halts, when you need to look at the map and maybe you're lost, or maybe whatever it is, when you're transition is when you're most vulnerable. And this man, Jim Jackson, was in a period of transition. He had transitioned from a place of safety and stability, where he was for, like, I think 15 years, 10 years at least, into a brand new operating environment. And when you're in a brand new operating environment, you don't know who your friends are or who your foes are, because they both wear clerics. And so that's the other thing that I looked at. I'm like, this man, I thought about it this way. If nobody goes from a devotion to the Holy Face to child porn in 90 days. Nobody does that. 0 people, 0 human beings. So there had to be signs elsewhere. And this was part of why, like, I wanted to cast a much wider net than just looking at 3 file transfers. It's not about 3 file transfers. It's about the moral man argument. Does a man do X when his past behavior is Y? So that's what pushed me into the action. And I'm sorry for the long answer, but that's
No, this is good.
again.
Take as much time as you need.
Well, again, we were on our knees in front of the Holy Face, and we looked at our Lord's face, and we looked at our Lord, his face disfigured from the passion, and blasphemed and spat upon and hit and swollen and bloody. And I started to just see Father Jim Jackson's face. And I thought to myself, he's going to be persecuted no matter what. Even if he's vindicated, he'll be persecuted. And I still think that's true.
Yeah.
But suppose the best case scenario. He's absolutely innocent and he's found not guilty. Suppose that I can at least help him rebuild his life, rebuild his image. Suppose that I can help to vindicate him in some way. And at the time, look, I looked at it on November 2nd. I didn't exactly know how I could help him. I didn't exactly know where the facts might lead. Lots of things have developed since then in the last 5 or 6 months. And as people who are in this line of work for a profession know, and they know well, these things take years. They take a long time. They don't move at the speed of advocacy news. And even the advocacy news people, the fake news journalists, so-called, the LARPers, the journal LARPers, as I like to call them, who know better, they are banking on the ignorance of their own audience. These people will spend 18 months preparing a story and an investigation and a case, and they get really excited and really antsy when they finally get to blow the lid on something. And here they are pretending that 5 months has gone by and that's some long amount of time in a criminal proceeding like this. Shame on them. Shame on them for absolutely being just the scummiest of liars to their own people and taking advantage of low information boomers.
Well, when you probably noticed, I got up to grab something, like just the way that you were talking about this case, like you're just uh, an average American citizen. Sure, you got a lot of knowledge, but you're a citizen. It's not like you have access to the rectory where the stuff was apparently going on. But like I see that kind of you're asking all the right questions. I had just got this book on the shelf. It came out in January. It's called The Betrayal of Anne Frank, and it tries to it tries to find out who betrayed their family to the authorities. And I see the same kind of thing here. I see you asking all the same questions, the common sense. It's like you have a piece of information. It's like, what does this mean? There's the sound bite that the newspaper is going to give to the world, but there's something below that sound point. There's some truth, but there might be some things that are spun. And I like this. And now you have again, you're free to talk about this as much as you want or as little as you want, but you have received some backlash for this fundraiser of yours.
Yeah, I mean, only from one organization on the planet. I've received zero backlash from even to this day, from not one single donor. We're talking about 500 plus people. 500 plus people from around the country came together and said, we want to pay Father Jackson's legal fees and we want to vindicate his name because we think he's innocent. And that's my point of view too. So long as everyone is open to the fact that, maybe we didn't know the guy like we thought we did. But as long as we find the truth, we just want to find the truth or help find the truth. Do the best we can to find the truth. And not one single person from the 500 plus people, not one has reached out, has said, I want my money back, has said, I don't like what you're doing, has said anything. I have not been told anything by anybody. The family has never reached out. I've never talked to Father Jackson. I've never spoken to his sister, who I have heard that he's close to. So a lot of what they put into print is absolutely false, absolutely lies. But one particular news blog, took exception with what I was trying to do, and to this day, I'll never understand why.
I don't understand why either.
There are so many wild theories as to why. People call them controlled opposition. They say they only attack trads now because that's their new funding base or whatever. I mean, I really don't care about that stuff. I'm not into the motivations. I don't understand it, and I may never, and I accept that. My mind doesn't just continually try to process why they would do this. Does Christine Niles hate Father Jackson because of some past dust up that they've had? I don't care if that's true or false. I've heard it. I've heard that that's true. But that doesn't make it true, and but I did have a phone call with Michael Voris, and on the phone call, he was pretty clear that that he doesn't believe in the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution, that he was very clear. He said, unless Father Jackson looks on camera, comes onto Church Militant, and looks in the camera and says, I'm not guilty, then he's guilty. He says, Mike, I'm telling you, he is guilty. He is 100% guilty if he doesn't come on camera and say that he's not guilty. And he was impassioned about it. I mean, he was so impassioned. I mean, he was using vulgarities. I mean, he was screaming. He was making wild accusations, telling me all kinds of stories, which were interesting. I don't know if any of them are true. I doubt half of them are, but he felt very strongly at the time when we spoke. I don't remember the date that we spoke, the 9th or 10th or 11th of November. I mean, just a week after launching the fundraiser. He's like, look, I'm telling you, he's guilty. He's guilty, guilty, guilty. And his justification for why he's guilty, of course, is that he wouldn't come to Mike Voris and say, hey, Gary, would you bail me out? Can I come on Church Militant? Can I proclaim my innocence with you? I mean, let's just stop and think about that for a second. Unless you imagine if I were to say that about anyone. Imagine if I were to say that person A, unless they come and grovel at my feet, at RTF's feet, unless they're willing to come onto my podcast and beg for my mercy, then I'm going to condemn them as being guilty. I'm going to just say, oh, they're guilty. I just want people to ponder that for a second. If you take nothing else away from this interview and this situation, which, it's so, when you're living it day to day, it's very involved, but, people pick up little pieces of news here and there. But the one thing I want people to really ponder on, maybe just take a minute and ponder on it. You could even pause the video and think about this. Does that make sense? Does it make sense at all to say, unless you come to me and tell me that you're innocent, then you're guilty? What does that say about you and who you think you are? Exactly. It sounds like the mafia. It sounds like the mafia. And I think that's going to be the recurring theme, is this mafioso, self-appointed mob boss that these internet thugs have created for themselves, because they will make the decision to either smear you or support you, not based on the objective truth, but based on how useful you are to them. And there are so many examples of that. For example, the private investigator, or the forensic scientist that I hired. The forensic scientist that I hired is a man named Michael Archer. His resume is impeccable. It speaks for itself. He has done 20 years of sex abuse in the church. He has been an expert witness on forensic cases involving child porn. He is he's one of the best possible people to do this. And in fact, he's so good, the Church Militant hired him twice. Church Militant used him on 2 different cases, including their most viewed case of all time, their Father Moreno expose. They featured Michael Archer as their quote unquote renowned forensic scientist. So this is a case where, okay, they've hired this guy. I don't know how much they've paid him, probably tens of thousands of dollars, to work for over a year on a long haul case. That's a huge expose. That's a huge exclusive story for Church Militant. They've hired this guy. They propped him up. They put him on their YouTube channel. You can Google his name on Church Militant. You can see tons of pictures of Michael Archer explaining crime scenes and doing this, and they give him all these credentials, right? And they give him all this credibility. But because he's now working on the Father Jackson matter, they smear him. They defame him. They say he's not licensed. He's not credible. He can't do this investigation. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's declared bankruptcy. What did he do with the $55,000? You see, that's not the search for objective truth. That's not reporting the objective news. That's literally the same thing as making yourself the arbiter of what is true and false, the arbiter of objective reality. And that is what a narcissist does. A narcissist says to himself, I am so important that I decide who's good, who's bad, who's guilty, and who's innocent. And so by the very same logic that Gary Michael Voris told me on the phone, and he's never disputed this, by the way. I've put this out there since November, and the man has never disputed it because he knows it's true. Unless he comes to me and begs my help and comes on my YouTube channel and says he's innocent, then he's guilty. That's what he says about Jim Jackson. He decides who's innocent and who's guilty based on how useful they are to him. Same with Michael Archer, renowned forensic scientist who has done these cases before, who has been an expert witness in these cases. That's why I hired him. That's why Church Militant hired him. We've literally hired the same guy, but when he works for Church Militant, he's an expert. But when he works for me, he's a nobody.
He's a bankrupt, unlicensed guy you can't trust. Wow. You had put something on your YouTube channel a few days ago at RTF Media, and you had linked to a certain book published by Dr. E. Michael Jones. I just want everyone to know what that is. This is the old paper issue of Culture Wars. One is July-August 2016, and the other one is September 2016. And Dr. Jones took these articles, combined them to make an ebook. You can hear a portion of it on Mike's channel. And yeah, so if you just want to learn of the type of character that Mike is dealing with, and that is kind of afflicting the Catholic community online, that's where to learn it.
I didn't know you were going to bring that up, and I'm glad you did.
Oh.
The name of the book is the Man Behind the Mask, Michael Voris and the Homosexual Vortex, and it's self-published by Dr. E. Michael Jones. I put out a section from chapter 6 to people just so that people could understand, like, this is a page turner. This is a dramatic book. I mean, it is well written. It's well sourced. Dr. E. Michael Jones somehow got his hands on all these emails and contemporaneous documents. And in his book, he alleges that Michael Voris is engaged in all kinds of criminal activity. Dr. Jones has contemporaneous emails from the members of the board of directors, guys like Frank Cohn, Mark Bramer, Terry Carroll, who are all saying in the month of April of 2016, when Michael finally admitted that he had been a sodomite for most of his life, and that he was HIV positive, apparently, right? The board of directors is like, well, how do we deal with this? This is chapter 6, and it's really riveting. I hope people listen to it. And there's like a 7-day period there where Michael agrees to go quietly into the night and do penance for his sins and for misleading Catholics and for lying to them and for duping investors and for all this stuff. It's all in the book, right? And it's all in there. And Dr. Jones talks a lot about homonarcissism.
Oh yeah.
And, a homonarcissist is somebody who would say something like, unless you come for my help, then you're guilty. I'll condemn you. I'll smear you. I'll attack you. A homonarcissist is someone who would say, well, when you work for me, you're credentialed, but when you work for RTF, you're not credentialed. So all of these behaviors that everyone is seeing play out in the public right now are just reflections of what Dr. Jones has written in his book. And his book is available for purchase on Fidelity Press. One of the things that I admire about E. Michael Jones, now look, we have our disagreements. E. Michael Jones and I are not on the same page on a number of things, but that's the thing about adults, high-functioning adults, is you can agree about something without suing each other.
Yeah,
High-functioning
exactly.
adults can agree about something and just say, hey, look, let's set that issue aside. Let's agree to disagree for now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like we don't agree on the SSPX, we don't agree on the Latin Mass, we don't agree on Fatima. That's fine. What we do agree on is primary sources. And the fact of the matter is E. Michael Jones appears, from my point of view, to have primary sources that demonstrate that there is a long, sordid history of criminal activity that should be looked into. But at the same time, a guy who wants to appear youthful forever, who doesn't want to age, there's something wrong with that. There's just something intrinsically wrong with that. There's a guy who goes out of his way to have the artificial hair style of a 20-year-old on a 60-year-old's face is not a guy that you would trust in most walks of life. I mean, Al, if this is just a hypothetical situation, but if somebody came to your house that obviously had hair plugs and obviously had a venereal disease, and he wanted to sell you magazines, or he wanted to vaccinate your dog, or if he wanted to be a pest control person, or if he wanted to sell you a home security system, or you just wouldn't take this person seriously at all. But like, now suppose that same person puts himself out there as this literal savior of the church, as someone who says, I'm going to put forth my own magisterium, my own parallel magisterium. I'm going to decide what's true and false. I'm going to decide what's Catholic and not Catholic. I mean, you take the least trustworthy guy type of man of all, the least trustworthy type of man who breaks the most fundamental laws of nature, and you say, oh, he's going to be the arbiter of truth. He's going to decide which priests are innocent and guilty. He's going to decide who to smear and not smear. I mean, it just doesn't, it defies logic to place any trust in a guy like that who has demonstrated publicly. I mean, he's lied about me. He's lied about, he went down to Texas and an RTF supporter caught him on tape, literally lying about me. Here's what he said. He said, there are 3 reasons why he's suing me. And for those who don't know, yeah, Church Militant is suing me. There's the stated reason on paper, and then there are the 3 reasons that Mike Voris said on the tape. Reason number 1 that he's suing me is that he says I called Christine Niles a chink. Well, that never happened. That just has never happened. And they've since admitted that that never happened. They went out on Twitter and they literally admitted, yeah, he's right. He never did that. Okay, so that's number one gone.
And that's lying about a serious issue, like if accusing someone of racism when it's clearly not true. Like we know the people on the far left, they make up this lie of systemic racism and stuff. And of course, it's a very serious issue. Like I don't take true racism lightly, but it has to be true. That's not something that you accuse someone of. And
Yeah,
now,
it's a serious and damaging lie because in our cancel culture that we live in, if you are credibly accused of being a racist, then you're unemployable. You know what I mean? So this strikes at the heart of, like my family and my livelihood and my ability to provide for my children and all of that. So it's a very, yeah, you're right. It's a very serious lie. And they admitted that it's a lie. So again, he says on this tape, he's suing me for 3 reasons. Number one, because he says I called Christine Niles a chink, which they walked back. The second reason why he says he's suing me is because he says that I have accused him of having a homosexual relationship with a priest. Now, this is really important, and I'm speaking about this for the very first time on YouTube with you, because in a court document, they have proven that this is an absolute lie. An absolute lie. What he's referring to is that one of the canceled priests that they back was living at his house for some period of time. And I have an eyewitness who was a contractor at his house who told me that Michael Voris was cohabitating with this priest. And so I very innocuously mentioned that. I said, hey, he's bunking with this priest. And I even had a second tweet underneath that said, I'm not implying anything by this. I'm just saying that they're cohabitating. Now, look, if I were cohabitating with a young woman, that would not be a prudent thing to do. So at a minimum, from appearances, it's a stupid thing to do. Church Militant has a 7-figure operating budget, maybe an 8-figure operating budget. They can afford to put this priest in an Airbnb or in a hotel. There's no reason why Michael Voris, who has admitted to a lifetime of sodomy, needs to be cohabitating with an adult male, a priest. In fact, a priest who says that he is a victim of sexual abuse. Okay, so now you have 2 damaged men under one roof. It's not a smart thing to do. And so that's all I was pointing out. In the court document, now, first of all, Voris says that somehow I'm implying that he's having a homosexual relationship with this priest. That's not true. I never implied that. I never said that. And I even specifically clarified on Twitter, but they wanted me to delete a bunch of tweets and, on this fake offers to settle and all this stuff. And so, look, it is what it is. But all I said was he's bunking with this guy, and it's pretty dumb. They can afford to put him up in an Airbnb. Now, in the court document, they have admitted in the discovery process, they have admitted, Al, after calling me a liar, after saying he doesn't live here, we've never cohabitated, they've admitted in the court document that he had lived there. Now, they describe it as being brief, but who knows what brief means, right? Who knows what brief means? It's not like they're. Yeah, I asked them for specific days. I have an eyewitness that says that Michael Voris walked around in a bath towel and answered his door in a bath towel, who also said that this particular priest was living there. And they've admitted it in a court document that he was there for some period of time. So, okay, back to the 3 reasons. They sued me because they said I called Christine Niles a chink, and then they admitted that that was a lie. Then the second reason they sued me, according to Michael Voris on the tape, January 30th tape or whatever, because I said he was having a homo relationship. I never said that. And he admits that he's hanging out with this guy under one roof. Okay. So that's debunked. So the third reason that they are suing me, according to him, is I said that they steal money from their investors. I have asked them to clarify this statement. I have begged them to point to anywhere in the world where I have said that they steal money from their investors. They can't. They cannot substantiate that lie. What I have said, Al, is that they have blown through millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars potentially. And one of the claims that they make in writing to their premium subscribers, and whenever they put out a urgent fundraiser email, they claim that one of their capabilities is to get rid of the bad bishops. So all I did was I said, look, you guys over the course of your existence have had to have spent at least $50 million, right? Since 2008, let's say. 50 million, conservative estimate. I mean, Michael Voris himself says that his monthly payroll is $250,000. So if they're spending $250,000 a month just on payroll, that doesn't include any of their other operating expenses, then easily they've spent, let's just say conservatively, $25 million, right? Al, $25 million spent, and Supich is still in charge, and Worrell is still around, and Dolan is still in charge, and you know
Archbishop
what I mean?
Gregory. Yeah.
Like all of these people are still in charge. Yeah, what's his name? They call him the African Queen. That's what they call him. Whatever his name
Archbishop
is.
Gregory. Yeah.
Yeah, him. Yeah, you mentioned it. All of these people are still firmly entrenched and in power and suppressing the true faith. And you've spent 25 to 50 million dollars. All I said was, look, you're just not very effective. Like, if you say that your mission statement is to get rid of these people and you've raised tens of millions of dollars, look, it's not a crime to be like, well, maybe on some level it's negligence or whatever, but technically I don't think it's a crime to just suck at your job, right? To just be absolutely ineffectual. And so he has said, so that's the closest I've ever said to anything resembling his claim that I said that they're stealing money from their investors. No, I just think that they're not good stewards of their resources. They've overbuilt a studio for like 600 people to watch their broadcast. Like, who, you know what I mean? Like, who does that? Like, why would you build a multi-million dollar studio when your core demographic audience is like 650 people, which is, just insane to do that. Only a homo narcissist would do that, right? Like, it just kind of goes back to E. Michael Jones' psychological evaluation of Michael Voris. Only a guy like who thinks that he's the arbiter of what's true and false, who thinks that he can convict people, who thinks that he can credentialize somebody or uncredentialize somebody based on their usefulness to him, based on their utility to him, based on your relationship to Voris, is how you define your worth or utility as a human being. Only somebody like that would build a $2 million studio, a $5 million studio, whatever it is, for a boomer audience that is dying and shrinking. I mean, you just look at their engagement online. You look at their online engagement. Just go to Twitter. These people can't get more than 5 or 10 likes to any of their tweets. And yet, ostensibly on paper, they have like, what, 45,000 people following them? I mean, it's just, none of it adds up. None of the math works. None of the money that they've spent seems to make any sense for any. There's no tangible accomplishment whatsoever besides the self-aggrandizement of a man who appears to be attempting to reenact his glory days of when he was a news reporter at NBC local affiliate, no one cares, never won an Emmy, whatever, while he was living a sodomite lifestyle. Like, it appears to be that this man has built an entire empire around him to enable himself to live action role play, to LARP as a journalist. And do I think that that's a good use of resources? No, I don't.
No, I don't think it's a good use. I mean, and like the thing that makes Jones's the Dr. E. Michael Jones's analysis of our friend Mr. Voris so credible is that he's done this with other figures as well. You know, it's not like he's picking on Voris. He's done this with Pete Buttigieg. I can't pronounce his name, and he's talked about a lot of people. Yeah, you know, he's done this. This is Jones's thing. He's very good at investigating this, and it's ironic that they are suing you, Church Militant, but as soon back in 2016 when these two articles came out, you would think they'd sue Jones, who I don't think has a lot of cash. I mean, I don't think he's super wealthy, but it's like, all right.
This is an interesting point. This is an interesting point you raise, because here are a couple things about defamation law that I've had to learn in my crash course in defamation law. The ultimate truth, or the ultimate defense to defamation, is truth. If what you're saying is true, then it can't be defamation by definition. By definition of defamation, if what you're saying is true, then you cannot claim that it's defamation, right? So just if you take nothing else away about like defamation and these lawsuits and this crazy legal action and all this, you know, insanity that's happening, if what you're saying is true, or you believe it to be true at the time, and you had a good faith reason for believing that it's true, then it's not defamation. Okay. So with that in mind, you're right. They didn't sue E. Michael Jones. E. Michael Jones wrote a damning book about Michael Voris, exposed his inner life, his inner circle, his relationship with Christine Niles, who he says is absolutely toxic, a cancer on that organization. He relays very intimate details about the business. He talks about fraud. He talks about extortion. He talks about thievery, self-enrichment. He talks about how Voris stole Church Militant from Mark Bramer. He talks about, you know, the hiding of Voris's past. He talks about, you know, his HIV positivity, all of it, right? Now, bear in mind, they sued me over like a YouTube video and a couple tweets. Lickety splits. This book by E. Michael Jones has been out since 2016, and they never sued him. Now, at one point, I saw Christine put out on Twitter, no, not on Twitter, on Facebook. She said, well, we ran out of time. The statute of limitations ran out. We just forgot. You expect us to believe, Christine, that you just forgot? You're the most litigious so-called Catholic there ever was, right? And you expect us to believe that you just forgot to sue E. Michael Jones when he wrote about your sick, weird twisted relationship with Voris. And by the way, I happen to know more than what's in the book. And I won't go into it now, but let's just say the manner in which that woman stalked Voris and stole his phone number from like a call booth that she was operating and like was his biggest fan. I mean, just weird groupie. It's like taking your weirdest like stalker groupie and making him or her your, you know, number 2 executive officer of your organization. Like, again, who does that? Only a narcissist would do that, but there we go. But they expect us to believe that they ran out of time to sue Jones. They ran out of time. Now, again, go back to what I said about defamation. The ultimate defense to defamation is the truth. So I contend that Catholics should look at this and say, what's more likely? They knew Jones was telling the truth and they couldn't sue him because they would lose, or they just forgot. They just ran out of time. Which of those two scenarios is the most likely? I mean,
oh, we forgot to sue Dr. Jones. Darn, you know, like I remember when I read those tweets as well, and I'm like, well, if they expect people to believe this, I guess they've earned their audience,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And here's what like the ultimate dynamic with that too. And I think your point about earning their audience is plays into this. I believe the vast majority of their premium subscribers, who are all low information boomers, have no idea that they're engaging in this kind of stuff. Look, they're in a defamation suit with with a priest in New Hampshire. They're constantly in litigation around the country. When they win, like they won in Baltimore, then they go and they parade it and they do a victory lap around it and they let their people know. But if they lose, like it appears like they're losing in New Hampshire, and like if they continue on with me, they're most likely going to lose. They're not going to let their premium subscribers know about it. So they know their audience better than anyone. They have the analytics that you and I don't have. But you can tell from their public behavior that they're desperately trying to hang on to trads who are on the new media platforms like Twitter and like YouTube. But like the sort of normie JP2 conservative Novus Ordo Catholics who are boomers on Facebook, they don't cross over. They don't cross over between the two things. And they certainly, in my opinion, and based off of what I know, they never fully inform the people who donate money to them that they're just donating to a legal harassment slush fund that is just going to be used to be locked in endless litigation that could be ended, could be settled, could be just put aside, never had to happen anyway. But when your skin is so thin, when you are a narcissist, when you are as fragile as those two people are, or at least one of them is, and then his attack dog, then your emotions and your own fragility and your own uncertainty about and lack of confidence in your own identity translates to wanting to just sue people out of existence. So for those who don't know, and I know you don't want to do a 10-hour broadcast here, so I'll just kind of land this plane real quick for you. For those who don't know, I'm suing them back. I'm countersuing. I have real claims. Church Militant has admitted in court documents that they went to my business partners and my boss. They told them horrible things about me. And they basically made threats to them, veiled threats, mob boss type. That remember mafioso is the theme. That more or less, that our business that we built together for years would suffer as a result of me raising money for Father Jim Jackson. And as a result, my business partners, kind of panicked. And they said, we don't want any part of this. We work in a woke industry. We don't want to get canceled. Just leave us alone, Gary, please. Okay, we'll get rid of Mike. We'll get rid of Mike. Well, that's illegal. Like, where in your adult life have you ever had a disagreement with a human being? Where in your adult life have you ever said, hey, I don't like that guy's opinion, so I'm going to go to his boss and I'm going to exercise leverage over him. I'm going to make threats to the boss that, things are going to come out and you guys are going to be implicated and your business is going to be destroyed. Now imagine, look, if you're in the media business, like little Gary is, and you say the media is going to find something out, you're implying that you're going to leak it. Like, it'd be like being in the demolition business and being like, yo, if you don't stop, like, somebody might demo your house. I'm just saying, somebody might do that. I'm just saying, right? That's what he did. If you're in the trash business, I'm just saying it would be a huge shame if some trash trucks were to show up and just haul all of you off. I mean, that's more or less what has happened here. So that's a crime. It's called tortious interference with business relationships. So I'm suing them for that. They have admitted in a court document, this is the first time I'm releasing this information to the public at all on any platform. They've admitted in a court document that they have contacted the Marine Corps, with whom I was affiliated as a reserve officer, and through which I provided health care to my 6 children. That they sent their bogus lawsuit to the Marine Corps in hopes of trying to destroy my relationship, my almost 15 years of honorable service. Combat veteran 2 times, company commander, highly decorated. I mean, I have like 5 personal awards. Most people with my time in service have 3. I have a sterling military record. Ranked number 1 officer multiple times. In fact, one of my performance evaluations ranks me number 1 out of 57 officers.
Wow.
Over the entire course of the officer's career who ranked me. So in other words, when I was a lieutenant, he gave me these markings that made me the top of his profile, number 1. And he since rated all these lieutenants, and they all fell in underneath. So for his entire lifetime in the Marine Corps, he's a colonel now. I am the top lieutenant he's ever written on. I mean, I'm telling you, I have a sterling military record. Headed for colonel, easy. That's what many people who looked at my record said. And I will most likely be dishonorably discharged because of Church Militant. Because they are part of the cancel culture that they claim to be opposed to. Because they didn't like that I supported Father Jim Jackson. And because when Christine Niles put in writing that unless you give back every single penny, we're going to go after you. This is a woman who says that she graduated from law school. This is a woman who claims that she's an attorney. And she is so stupid that she puts into an email that she's going to smear me and my personal life. And this was a direct response to my email where I said, look, if you do this to me, the Marine Corps is going to kick me out because it's the woke Biden DOD. It's going to harm my job. It's going to it's going to have all these adverse effects on my family. Please don't do this to me. And her response to that was, I'll tell you what, I won't ruin your life if you abandon Father Jim Jackson. The woman is so cynical, so stupid that she would put that into writing. So, yeah, I mean, that's what they did. They went to my boss. They went to the Marine Corps. I've been unemployed for the last 6 months because of this. My name has been thrown through the mud. I'm most likely going to lose my military commission. My 6 children will not have health care as a result of it. They've tried their best to make me unemployable by presenting me as, by dragging my name through the mud to the extent that they can. They say that I'm a racist. They say that I'm a Nazi. I mean, I'm a racist in a biracial marriage. Explain that, right? Again, they've done all of these things to me, all because they don't like Father Jim Jackson. And again, I go back to the very first comments in the show. I can't explain it. I don't know why it's happening, but I accept it as my cross. Some people are like, well, you're fighting vigorously and you should just be quiet and stuff. And you should just make peace and all this stuff. My very quick message to them is just, that's a nice and holy and pious thought, but you've obviously never been sued. The fact of the matter is that when you're involved in active litigation, you have to answer motions, you have to answer documents, you have to provide documents. They now have my tax returns for several years. When I sold my house a year ago, they have my home sale documents. They have the documents for when I purchased my current house. They have evidence of, they have military records, including my security clearance, my networking certifications, They have other military documents that I've had to provide them. They have my text messages, my emails. They have my operating agreement from my work. They have my pitch documents for my work. They have all kinds of intimate information about my life. And I'm just a hobbyist. They act like I'm running this big enterprise here. I have a hobby podcast just like you do, Al. My channel's just a little bit bigger because I've been doing it a little bit longer. That's it. It's just regularity. They act like RTF is some source of income for me. It's not. It's now definitely not broken even. It had broken even for a time, and then now it's back in the red. I don't do this. I don't do this for a living. I don't have some massive conglomerate. I don't have some secret funding source. I'm not tied to Opus Dei. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have any angel investors. I'm just a guy who has had the extraordinary privilege of living a unique American life on Wall Street, in entertainment, in project management, in war. I have lots of accomplishments for being my age, and I'm proud of them. I did pay off my house, and I'm proud of that. And, they make these Marxist arguments like, how did he pay off his house? Well, it's called eating rice and beans and clipping coupons, Christine. Maybe you should try it. But
rice and beans. Are you a fan of Dave Ramsey?
I am. In fact, my wife and I used the Dave Ramsey program to get out of debt early. The first thing we did when we got married, we didn't buy a house until we were married for 4 years. So the first 4 years of our marriage, we rented a place and we paid off our student loans. We paid off our car. And we went from 2 cars to 1 car, even though we had a child at that point, and I was working a crazy Marine Corps schedule, but we made it work with 1 car. Then we bought a house, and we did everything we could to pay it off as quickly as we could. And, and then buying and selling houses. And, look, real estate has appreciated since the Great Recession. So you buy an appreciating asset and you sell it and you take the gain and you roll it into a new house, and voila, like magically, eventually, if you keep doing that, and if you keep doing, smart living and living on cash budget with your envelopes and whatever, and you pay off the smallest debts, then you can pay off your house. And they're like obsessed with the fact that I paid off my house. You know what? They should be celebrating that fact, but instead they're Marxists. They're absolute Marxists. And Christine spends, or at least she spent, a great number of her Sundays and holy days in November, December, January timeframe obsessing over like my car or my house or my wool scarf that I would wear, or like she at one point was talking about my bachelor party. And again, they have thousands of pages of documents about me. They have my finances going back for years and years. And the only thing that they can say is that I am doing exactly what I said I was going to do. I said that I was going to provide a CPA report, and I view that as an overhead expense for the Father Jackson Defense and Investigatory Fund. And so I went to the escrow attorney and I'm like, hey, here's the bill for the CPA report so I can get this report out to everybody. Please pay this bill. And out of, I don't know how many thousands of pages. Maybe it's 10,000, maybe it's 5,000, maybe it's 100,000. I don't know. Out of 10,000 pages, let's say, of discovery that I have provided them, my emails, my text messages, my personal contacts, my business relationships, my personal taxes, everything that I've given them, right? Out of all of that, they say, you asking the escrow attorney to pay the CPA bill is fraud. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they hang their hat on. I mean, it's so pathetic. It's like the worst excuse for LARPing as a journalist that you can imagine. And what's so remarkable is, like, nobody even cares. Nobody takes it seriously. Nobody believes anything that they're saying. So that's the current state of affairs. In terms of Father Jackson, I can't tell you anything. I know a lot about the man now. I know a lot more than when I started this, obviously. The criminal justice system moves slow. It doesn't move at the pace of advocacy news.
Yeah.
All I can recommend is that everybody pray for him, pray for his family, because whatever evil I'm facing, however much Church Militant has wrecked my life, and believe me, they have, and they've done it on purpose with malice, someone else has gone out of their way to wreck his life, and in a more irreparable way.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll be able to find another job. Even I'll find some job where someone doesn't happen to, you know, Google search my name and say, oh, this fringe group, the Church Militant says he's a Nazi, so we can't hire him. I'll be okay, I think. But Father Jackson's not. Even if he's found not guilty, he's a marred priest. He will never be in active service again, even if he's vindicated, even if my investigation demonstrates his vindication in a more holistic way than just 3 file transfers in the month of September 2020. You know what I mean? Like, even if all of us come together and he's vindicated in court and he's vindicated by Michael Archer and the team working underneath Michael Archer that I'm supervising, he will forever be a priest who offers mass in private chapels. And for a cleric like that, that is the death sentence. That is a death sentence. So if you feel bad for me, you should feel way worse for Father Jackson, because I still to this day believe that he's innocent, and that's it.
Yeah,
That's
no, I do hope the best for Father Jackson, and like I think I don't know if I've said this publicly, but and of course I bet Michael Voris is going to have someone watch this, but if he doesn't watch it himself, but in 2013 in my city of Calgary, if people don't know, I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. But he came to my city. He gave a talk at the local Irish community center. And of course I went, you know, I got my picture with him. It's still on my phone. And at the time I thought highly of him. Then a few years later, this comes out. And then the thing happened with you. And the thing that I didn't understand, okay, he didn't agree with your fundraiser. Why can't he say, look, this guy, Mike from RTF, has a fundraiser. We think it's bogus. Here's why you shouldn't donate to it. If that's all he did, you know, people disagree, right? You know, like you said, we disagree with Dr. Jones on the Latin Mass, but, you know, we disagreed like adults, you know, and the fact that he does not like your fundraiser and they're taking these steps against you. I find that was really the last straw for me. And there were not a lot of straws left at that point, but that was the last straw.
Yeah. And you know, to be candid, I don't think you're alone in that opinion. I think that they've overplayed their hand on this one. I think they've gone out way over their skis on this, and they have no one to blame but themselves. Because to your point, you can go out and say, hey, look, we don't agree with this fundraiser. It's premature. It's silly. You know, we don't like it for these specific reasons. Fine. Behave like adults. But to say we're going to destroy you, we're going to go after your personal life, we're going to go reach out to your bosses, we're going to dox you online, we're going to call you a Nazi, we're going to go to the Marine Corps, we're going to try to get you, you know, dishonorably discharged, we're going to ruin your life, we're going to take healthcare from your children, and then we're going to continually attack you every single Sunday and holy day of obligation. We're going to smear the living daylights out of you. That's not news. That's absolutely not news. Like the fact, I mean, it's kind of funny. In a sardonic kind of way, that their top 2 U.S. news stories right now are me and another priest that they're suing. So in other words, their U.S. news is just a hit list. It's just the 2 people that they hate. The top 2 news stories on churchmilitant.com right now are the 2 guys that they hate the most. That's not news. That's not an objective news. That's not what news is supposed to be. Educating the public about things that they need to hear about, things that are edifying to them. If you're Catholic news, you should be talking about things that are edifying them in a Catholic way, or at least things that are germane to the Catholic world, right? The fact that they have weaponized their platform to just go after people that they don't like, people are seeing through it. And they want to blame me because, they say, they claim that I've harmed them, gravely, that there's been so many people that have unsubscribed because of me and all this stuff. And I just kind of look at it and like, you have yourself to blame for that. You decided to cross the threshold of like sanity. You went from disagreeing with a fundraiser, as to your point, to trying to destroy a family man, destroy his life, doing everything you can to destroy him, to render him unemployable. And a lot of people have had reactions to that. Some people say they're jealous of the market share. Some people say they're controlled opposition. Some people say that they're secretly anti-trad. And part of the reason why they've never deposed, Dolan or Barron is because they're secretly friends with Barron and Dolan. What I actually noticed is that they haven't attacked Word on Fire for a full year. Word on Fire right now is undergoing its own passion.
Yeah.
All kinds of things are coming out about Bishop Barron and this guy, Joey Glore, this producer. All kinds of accusations are being made about them.
That's amazing stuff. Like,
it's really salacious. It's really sensational. It's right up their alley. They claim that they're into like sex crimes, right? It's right up their alley. And yet not a word about Bishop Robert Barron, not a word about Word on Fire, not a word about Joey Glore. But they now have collated, very conveniently for my attorneys, by the way, they have collated all of their articles about me, all of their little short stories, their little short films, and all this stuff. And as a film person, I'm like, oh, that's so cute. Like, good job. You know what I mean? Like, oh, nice job, little Gary. Pat yourself on the back, give yourself a raise. But they're very obviously obsessed. They're very obviously obsessed with me because of all of this. And it's because I decided to take a stand. There was a moment, there was a decision point, and I really do have to land this plane because I'm running short on time. But there was a decision point, Al, where it was like in the November, 12, 13, 14 time frame, where I had the option of saving my own skin, maintaining my relative anonymity, not being doxxed by these people, going back to the job site in North Carolina that I was kicked off from, finishing that job with my business partners, keeping my paycheck, keeping everything intact. And all I had to do was betray Father Jackson. That's all I had to do. There was a period of time where all I had to do was say, I never knew him, and give all the money back and say, let him fend for himself, and abandon him, and let him do his own thing. Let him get himself defended, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could have done that. And you know what? I contend, and I still contend, that a lot of these people who comment and they're like, why don't you just be nice, just drop it, whatever. I think a lot of people, when given the opportunity to save their own skin versus stand for a principle, will do the former.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing for Gary the Fairy Voris and Nazi Niles is that they picked a fight with a guy who is willing to stand on a principle, even if it means losing my own skin. And I made that decision because I made a commitment to the 500 plus donors that I would see this through to the end. I made specific promises to them that I intend to keep to the best of my ability. And, you know what? Come what may, because we as Catholics are not consequentialists. We don't look at the outcome and decide and then decide what we're going to do based on what we think the outcome is going to be. We look at the integral good of the act. And my conscience would not permit me to abandon Jim Jackson just because a homo narcissist got involved and made threats to my family, to myself, to my livelihood, to my business partners. Sometimes when a bully comes into your life, you have to stand up to him. And it may cost you dearly, you know? And that's my message to people is it has cost me dearly. It's costed me tremendously. I mean, I don't know that I could calculate the damages that these people have done to me. To lose a lifetime of military benefits over them, lifetime of healthcare, lifetime of benefits, the VA loan for the rest of my life, the GI Bill for my children. I had transferred the GI Bill to my children. My children's college education now is at risk because of these people. Kicked off of my own job site. My business partner's afraid, petrified in fear. You know, my name being tarnished, being doxxed. They publish pictures of my house online. People have emailed me and say, hey, I know exactly where you live. I don't know that I could calculate the damages that these wretched, demonic freaks have done to me, all in the name of trying to convince me to abandon a principle. And the principle is doing what you're saying, what you're going to do. Standing shoulder to shoulder with somebody. Do you have someone's back or don't you? And a lot of people are all talk on this. A lot of people are talk. I got it. Do you have his back or not? Do you back the guy or not? Well, you know what? When the chips are down, you know who has a guy's back and who doesn't. And that's the one of the goods that have come out of this whole situation is I know who has my back. And I know who was all talk. I know who, when the chips are down, when you really are in need, who's going to be there, who's a real friend, and who just reads about friendship or podcasts about friendship or publishes things about friendship. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There are the all talk, no action, and then there are the real gritty people who are like, I'm in this with you. But I tend to think about this like, in terms of the economy of grace, Church Militant has done for me a great favor, the greatest favor that money couldn't buy. I couldn't take, let's say this lawsuit cost me $75,000. I could not take $75,000 and buy the grace that this persecution has given to me. I couldn't, there's no way to convert 75,000 US dollars into the abundance of grace that our Lord has showered into my life in order to help me to deal with this persecution. And so from that point of view, I look at him and I say, hey, thanks. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Niles. Thanks for being psychopaths. You know, I appreciate your insanity. Your insanity is helping me get to heaven. Because at the end of the day, you're not taking away my family. You're not taking away my faith. You might want to take away my house. You might want to take away my possessions, my property. You might hate Brother Martin, and you might hate the fact that I'm helping him build his monastery. You might hate all those things because you're demonically oppressed. That's fine. And you might take away the monastery, and you might even take away this beautiful hilltop that we live on. But you're never going to take away my normal, well-ordered family life that you don't have. And you can never have. So it is what it is.
Well, I've just got one more question, and it's tad on the personal side. If you don't want to do it, just say so. You talk about how you're standing and fighting, and like I know that has a lot to do with your faith and your support of Father Jackson, but do you think that has something else also to do with the fact that your background in the army for 15 years?
I don't know. That's a chicken and egg question. It's like, what came first? You know, like in my experience in recruiting and all that, it's like certain people are drawn to military service. They tend to be people who want to do a higher calling, who want to be involved in something that's bigger than themselves, who want to put mission in front of, you know, personal concerns. They tend to be those people. And then the military cultivates those characteristics. So it's hard to pinpoint on which came first, in terms of
Okay.
you have to, I mean, you have to kind of like have a screw loose to run towards the gunfire, not away from it. You have to have a screw loose in order to say, I'm going to fight to the death for this man over here, even if I have to die trying. So I don't know. I don't know if I already had a screw loose and the Marine Corps just cultivated that, or if my beloved Corps taught it to me. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. All I can say is that whatever level of perseverance or fortitude that I have, and it's very, very little, because I'm not physically suffering, I'm not being tortured, I'm not being asked to apostatize. You know what I mean? Like these aren't real principles that are involved here. These are lesser principles of things like loyalty and character and integrity and doing what you say. Nobody has a gun to my child's head, right? So I don't know that I could withstand that. But whatever minimal level of fortitude, perseverance, long suffering, any of the virtues or sub virtues that you can name, constancy that I am trying to cultivate right now in this situation, it is nothing compared to the saints. It is nothing compared to what it is that we actually need to get to heaven. And that's why, in a way, I'm thankful for this, because if we're not prepared to be red martyrs, then we're not prepared to go to heaven. And not everyone is crowned with red martyrdom. God alone in his divine will selects who the red martyrs are going to be, who the blood martyrs are going to be. And we can't go out and seek it. We can't go out and say, I want to be a martyr. And we can't put ourselves in the situation and say, I have to be a martyr. But one of the ways to prepare for it and to train for it and to make sure that if it seeks you, that you have the right response to it, is to grow in the cardinal virtue of fortitude and all of its sub-virtues of long-suffering and courage and patience and longanimity, all of these sub-virtues of fortitude that are involved in withstanding an onslaught of fake news, of lies, of defamation, of detraction, of calumny, of all kinds of sins, mortal, grave sins that are being that are afflicting God. And and here's the final point. Final point. I keep saying final point, but this is it. All sin offends God. All sin offends. There's no such thing as a private sin, because a sin is an affliction to God. When our Lord walked the earth and he forgave people's sin, like when he forgave sins in between men, what he was demonstrating is that even if I sin against my fellow man, the primary person who's concerned about that sin is God, because I've sinned against God as well. And when all sin is a spit in his face, it is a blemish on his most adorable face. And so when I see now, and very honestly, very bluntly, when I see church militant committing grave sins against me, when they're lying, when they're detracting, when they're calumniating, my biggest sorrow that I pray for every day, I pray for the sorrow to come to me, is for God. I'm sorry that they're sinning because they are offending Almighty God. They're lying about me, twisting words, using fantastical language, to make themselves feel better about their blackmail. For whatever reason, there's no justification to offend Almighty God, and I'm really sorry on their behalf that they're doing this, because if they don't make amends for it, then it has eternal meaning to them. Like they're squabbling about how $55,000 was spent to a guy that they've hired, that they've given tens of thousands of dollars to. They're squabbling about that, but I hope they don't lose their souls over that, over this stupid squabble. You know what I mean? Like, I would hate to go to hell because I'm trying to argue that when I hired a guy, I was right, but when you hired a guy, you were wrong. I would hate for that to send me to hell because I had to lie in the process. I had to calumniate. I had to destroy. Everyone has the natural right to his name and his reputation. Everyone has that right. Father Jackson has that right, and I have that right. And they have taken away my good name and reputation. You have seen so many people who know me in real life, who have come to my defense, who have come out publicly, who have fought them. And that's because I have a lifetime of earned good reputation. I have a lifetime of working out my salvation in fear and trembling. For them to take that away from me merely over a disagreement about $55,000 going to a guy that they have paid tens of thousands of dollars to, for them to lose their eternal soul over that, I don't think it's worth it. And most importantly, for the pains to the most sacred heart that they are inflicting in their persecution of me and in their persecution, most importantly, of a good and holy priest. Their unjustified attacks on Father James Jackson. It's not worth it. It's certainly not worth it. So I do hope, to your point, they keep very, very close tabs on everything I do. They have 65 full-time employees. I'm just a guy here sitting on my iMac, right? I'm just a one-man show here. They have 65 full-time employees, and they have payroll to make, and they have, I don't know, 10 people assigned full-time to stalking me, maybe, I don't know. So certainly somebody's watching this right now at Church Militant. Certainly somebody at Church Militant is thinking to themselves, hopefully, by God's grace, they're thinking to themselves, what am I doing? Why am I persecuting this man? He never made a promise that he didn't want to fulfill. He didn't do anything out of malice. He didn't harm anybody. And why am I persecuting this guy? I hope that the lackey, the 20-year-old lackey that is assigned to watching this video right now, who's in the live chat with us, I'm sure, is doing some self-reflection and saying, what good is there in going after this guy who merely believes in the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney and the right to a speedy trial and innocent until proven guilty, like the foundational legal principles that we have inherited from the Magna Carta. So hopefully it's a wake-up call. Hopefully by doing interviews like this where people can get to know me a little bit better, they realize I didn't break any laws. I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't jump the gun on anything. I didn't do this for my own self-aggrandizement. I deliberately have chosen this passion for myself in order to keep my word to a man that I've never met before. And that I hope to meet him once we're both vindicated. And I hope to have a beer with him and say, you know what, Father, it was a heck of a ride. I've got some war stories. You have real war stories, and I hope that we can have a good laugh about it. And if we don't, and if that never happens, I hope to meet him in heaven. If I never meet him on earth, I hope to meet him in heaven. That is my goal. That is my goal for my children. I hope that my family is Catholic for 1,000 years. I hope that there are saints with my name for 1,000 years. And if this is a means of that, if this is a means of bringing that about, then I welcome it with open arms. If anybody is willing to help me sue Church Militant, because I've just found out this month that insurance is going to cover my defense going forward. So I'm still out tens of thousands of dollars in the past. So if you want to help me get whole, that's great. GiveSendGo.com/defeatcmtv, as in defeat Church Militant TV. GiveSendGo.com/defeatcmtv. But if I'm going to take the fight to them, if I'm going to pursue my real legal claims to repair my name, to repair my employment, to try to put my life back together, and to hold them accountable for the vicious, vindictive behavior that they've engaged in. I do need your help to do that because I have to pay for it, and they know that I don't have the money for that. So givesendgo.com/defeatcmtv if you want to donate to my legal cause. It's not just a legal defense anymore, it's a legal offense. I'm going to take the fight to the enemy because justice is also a cardinal virtue. I've talked a little bit about fortitude, but justice is a virtue. And what they've done is unjust. And if we can right it in this world, that's good for their souls. That's real charity, willing their good. Real charity is willing justice on this sphere so that they don't have to face justice for what they're doing to me later on. So it's for their own good that I'm suing them. givesendgo.com/defeatcmtv.
Okay, I'll definitely add that to the link below. I've got a link to your YouTube page. But yeah, that sounds like you put in. Is there any last thing you want to say? I think you wrapped it up, but I mean, in case you want to say one more thing.
No, I just want to thank you, Alan, because you're the first person that I've talked to on YouTube about this. I might consider doing more interviews like this. I might not. I don't know. I don't really need to do it. I don't really feel compelled to do it, but it's just because I've been following you and I trust you, and I thought, okay, I'll give you the interview because people are wondering what's going on with this thing. So if anyone has the stomach for a 2-hour explanation now, they can watch it. But I thank you for hosting it.
All right, and thank you for coming on, and of course, subscribe to his channel, RTF Media, and of course, subscribe to mine. But thank you, Mike, for coming on, and yeah, I'll kill the stream right now.